Hi, my name is Mark Straley. Today is April 30th, 2025. I'm with the Nebraska Vietnam Veterans Memorial Share Your Story project. Bellevue University is a sponsor of the NVVMF Memorial Park project. I'm currently at the Military Veterans Service Center of Bellevue University with Army veteran Harold E. Mahoney Jr., who has agreed to share his story for the Library of Congress Veteran History Project and the Nebraska Vietnam Memorial Park project. Let's begin with your full name.
Harold E. Mahoney Jr. And I have Mickey is my nickname, and I also go by Mick.
It's outstanding. Thank you so much. Where were you born, Mick?
I was born in Omaha, Nebraska at St. Catherine's Hospital.
In about?
August 4th, 1950. And I don't consider, really I would have had a different birth date, but the family doctor wanted to go on vacation, so he induced me. So that, when you look at a date, that could have an impact on a lot of things in the future.
Okay, outstanding. What can you tell me about your folks? What were their occupations and such?
My dad was an old-time plasterer, and he was extremely talented, and he could do decorative plaster, and I know he helped redo plaster at the Orpheum when they went to reopen it. He's done restoration work at the Durham Museum, but he was very talented. Unfortunately, they started coming up with drywall, so that kind of hurt him in a way, but he did learn to do that. And he was born in Omaha. My mom was born out in Seneca, Nebraska, which is a little ghost town. And she came to Omaha, or her family lost the ranch, and they went down to Arkansas, and then she came up here by herself, and her family eventually followed, and she worked at a store called Tip Top, and they did curlers, and then she worked for Kellogg's, and then after that she worked at Campbell Soup, and then back at Kellogg's.
Wow. Did you have any siblings growing up?
I have 7 brothers and sisters, and I am second oldest and the oldest boy.
Outstanding. Did any of them go into the military?
No.
Okay. And what high school did you attend?
South High.
Outstanding. What were your parents and or siblings' feelings about you getting into the military?
I really don't know about my dad at the time and what he felt. My mom, well, when she, I was part of the numbers when they drew them the first year, 69, and my number was 140, and I had a 50-50 chance. But they went to, I think, 169 of who got called in. And you watched them pull it on a black and white TV. And then I got called for a physical, which was before they pulled the numbers. And I was going to go out of town with some friends to Wisconsin, really looking forward to it. So I had to stay here. And then after that, I received my formal notice in April of 1970. And having a lot of brothers and sisters, when I came home, my mom had hidden the letter. She didn't want me to see the letter. And when I was like 8th grade, I asked her, am I going to go to war? And she says, no, you'll never go to war. And so they showed me the letter, and I read about boot camp and that. And so she was furious when she got home because they weren't supposed to do that. But of course, with all these kids, someone was going to do it.
Absolutely. What year then did you actually graduate from high school?
I graduated in 1968.
Okay.
And I was really shy. I pretty much worked lots of hours and went to school. And school wasn't really, I never took it as all that important. And work was, I think, to me, I felt was more important. And And I was really quiet. I didn't really have friends in school, one or two, but not close. And then when I went to work is when I started to make friends. And my last job I had before being drafted was at Exarban. And it was hard work, and it was long days, and that's where I really made the friendships that some of them still exist today.
Outstanding. Outstanding. Well, I was going to ask, did you hold any jobs? Now I know you've held some. What did you hold besides Exarban, though?
I started out shortstop, and there I mainly prepped, which was doing all the cabbage and everything that needed to be done, wrapping potatoes. And then I was what they call a dipper, where I would dip the chicken, shrimp, onion rings before they were deep fried, and was also a dishwasher.
Outstanding.
Then I went to Rose's Lodge, where I started as a dipper, and then I became the cook. And then when I went to Des Moines for 6 months, I worked for the West Des Moines news agency, and that was just clearing out old books, getting new books, what they call picking books and magazines that were going to go to the stores.
Okay.
And then that was really my best time ever. And I was living in a house with 3 other guys, and I wasn't going to do the school. It was math, and I didn't have math. And so kind of forced to come home because I wasn't going to school. I was still a minor. So I came home and did work at Exarban, and then the draft came.
Outstanding. So you've mentioned that you got drafted.
Yes.
And did you have personal feelings about that? In favor, against, ambivalent?
No, because I knew since I was 8 years old I was going to go. I mean, in my mind I was going to go. And then I thought, well, my number was 140, but my birth date could have been different, so that number could have been different. It could have been higher or lower, so that played into it in my head.
Sure.
And so it then it was just, well, I'm going to boot camp and that. It wasn't I had really, I say, no clue about Vietnam at that point in time.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, just didn't have any clue.
So as you left Omaha, did you leave a sweetheart behind
No.
or anything like that?
Nope.
Okay. And then you traveled somehow to Fort Lewis, Washington.
Right. And of my family, I'm the only one who lived in another state and all of that, and Boy Scouts going out of state for campouts for like a week at a time. So to me, it didn't bother me at all. I knew I was going to go. Went to the, well, before I went, during my physical, it was at the Fadley building. Mm-hmm. And you had to walk around to different stations in your socks, shoes, and underwear. And it came to the point you had to do a urine test. And you had like 3 or 4 urinals and tons of people lined up. And some guy says, hey, I went out and I had lots of beer last night. Can I fill your cup? And so I was one of them. We just passed our cups. He filled them and we turned them in. And then the eye test I flunked. So they said, we have to send you to an eye doctor, which they did, which was Greenberg Optical around the corner. Well, that happened to be our family eye doctor. And he said, hey, I was Mick, I got to give you the test because they sent me over and I got to return all this or have you bring all this back. He says, you'll never ever be able to see to shoot a rifle. So he filled all the paperwork out. I went back and they looked at it and says, don't worry, we'll get you glasses. So then I got my draft notice in April, went back down to the Fadley building, and there was about 12 of us from Omaha, Iowa, and we were on our way to Fort Lewis. The plane broke down on the way in Oregon, so we didn't get there until about 1 o'clock in the morning, and then you had to go through the rituals of all the paperwork, then they made you eat, and then you had to hit the bunks, and you had about maybe 2 hours sleep and they were waking you up already. So that was the first day.
Wow. Wow, that's quite a story. So tell us a little bit about basic training. What was a typical day like? What were the things about it you enjoyed? What were the things about it you didn't enjoy?
I always joke, out of all the family and cousins, I was probably the most unathletic person to go. Plus, couldn't really, had problems seeing sometimes. So I was really nervous about that at first, and also the rifle range. But within the first week, I'm running. First time I ran the mile, I wasn't the last one, so that was good. They took us in to get a haircut, and they had just started the modern army where you had to have like an inch or so of hair. As soon as we got to our company, they took us all back and they said, "We own you now. We're going to cut your hair." And so we all got to the fuzz. And we went into a regular building at this time, and it was Delta, and we were the Delta Penguins. And there were four platoons. I was in the 4th platoon, which is considered the worst platoon. And it just started out, our days were very early in the morning. You got up and you ate chow, and then until 9 o'clock or what at night, sometimes a lot later, you just did, anywhere from learning to throw a grenade to the rifle range, hand-to-hand combat, I can't think of the word.
Obstacle course?
No, the one where you can't breathe.
The NBC chamber. Which
is the
tear gas chamber.
That was the one I was looking forward to the most. Because for that one, I knew that I could hold my breath for a really long time. And so when we went in there, we had our mask on, and then you had to take it off, and I did. And I'm walking around, and I don't think anyone wasn't coughing except for me. And we almost got out, and then some guy yelled, "Drill Sergeant, Mahoney's not breathing." So drill sergeant took his fist and hit me in the stomach, and they made me stay in there for a while. So I got my fill of that. The rifle range was the biggest concern because I couldn't see to shoot. I couldn't I can't think of the words right now. With your turning it to help you shoot straight or whatever.
Adjusting the
sights. That didn't help because I couldn't see anyway.
You couldn't even identify the 300-yard targets, right?
No.
They'd pop up and you wouldn't even know it.
Yes, and I could see targets pop up, but I know. And there was a guy who had gotten out of who was waiting for his orders. He had just finished basic. And he says, he goes, "They're going to recycle you." And we had heard about recycling. It was a bad thing. He says, "They're going to recycle you. You are failing the rifle range, and you're going to go." He goes, "Do you see the big rock berm in front of the targets?" "Yes." And he says, "And you can kind of see where your target's at?" "Yes." "From now on, and right now, when the target comes up, you aim at the rock berm. The rocks will go up and hit the target and knock the target down." So that is what I did to get through basic training on the rifle range. So that was basically it. KP sucked even worse than what people said it did. A lot of it, they had like a cattle truck. They drove us in a cattle truck, and you could smoke them if you got them. And one guy from Omaha was smoking with another guy, and they got caught on the cattle truck. So they had to put their toes and elbows on the ground, everything above, and they put a whole pack of cigarettes in their mouths, and they could not go down until that entire pack of cigarettes was smoked.
Oh my God.
And you could see in their eyes were burning and everything, but that was an example for us.
Now, for the uninitiated, can you describe, because I've been on those same cattle trucks, can you describe the cattle truck for our audience?
Yeah, it was like a regular long cattle truck, and the part over the hitch was up off the ground, but there were benches along the side and benches up top, and that's what you would drive in. It was usually more likely than not, it was a cattle truck. Sometimes there may be a bus. Sometimes we're in a truck. I think we were in the cattle truck more often because they could get a large number of people into that.
A couple of drill sergeants can always get a couple of more soldiers into a cattle truck.
Yeah.
You'll fit. Yo, everybody move. Yo, we got 3 more guys to put on, right? Yeah, absolutely.
And so, so I think the cattle truck. The thing that also worried me is not having done anything athletic in my life was before you ate, you had to go through the monkey bars. Mm-hmm. And the monkey bars were low and your feet touched the ground and they rolled as you used them. And I never did the monkey bars. I never made it halfway through. And I know you had to go through the monkey bars for the PT test to move on. And that was really the only test I was worried about. This guy says, all we've been doing is all this stuff. He goes, you're a hell of a lot stronger than when you came in. So we did the monkey bars. They were way above ground. They didn't roll. And I was just amazed. I kept going back and forth. And I thought, wow, look at me.
Tell us a little bit about what living in barracks was like. I know you were in probably the World War II style open bay, double level barracks.
Yes.
But if you could tell us a little more about that experience, double bunks, triple bunks.
I am a poor example of that because when we went up, people were running into our side, and they had 2 rows of bunks, and they were on top of each other, and they had your red smoke cans. And as we're getting through to that, they said, oh, we're full, we got another room here. So we turned around and we went into this room. So there were 3 bunks doubled up. That was where we stayed. Mm-hmm. So it was like heaven compared to everybody else. And there was a guy from Omaha, the guy from Des Moines. There was Mitchell, who was a black guy from the South. There was a Hispanic guy, and then I think 2 other white guys. Mm-hmm. And so we were there, and we all hit it off, and it was good.
And for your floor, or in your platoon, how many were in your group roughly?
Gosh, I don't know.
Mm-hmm.
I want to say like 50 something. I don't know. It was a big number.
Sure. And how many toilets and how many urinals did you guys have?
We had, I believe, 3 urinals maybe. Mm-hmm. We had like 3 toilets, and we had maybe 5 shower heads. Mm-hmm. And having been a Boy Scout, I was used to group showers, and especially when I was gone for a week at a time, and when you go swimming and everything, no big deal. And high school, they had a private shower open, and the majority was all open. So there were some kids, to me they're all kids,
sure,
hadn't experienced that. Now all of a sudden you're cheek to cheek and whatever else in this small thing, and it could be funny.
Yep. Outstanding. Well, was there anything particular about basic training that you remember that was especially bad or especially good?
Especially bad was we had time off to go and clean the barracks. Mm-hmm. And so we went up, and a good number of people was caught not cleaning the barracks. And in our room, everyone but 2 were only 2 were considered the barracks. Mm-hmm. And they took us out to the low crawl, and we were killing ourselves, and over, and your lungs are burning, you can't breathe, and they didn't stop. And right after that, they took the company photo, and we were just all filthy and tired. You can just see we had been. That was really the worst. The best for me, and it was through my whole time in the service, was the friendships you made. You were away from home, some for the first time. You were around different people of color, which was the first time, and some had never seen a white person or a black person. You learned really quick, within a matter of days, everyone was important. They were all your buddies, and without them, it could happen. And so there was no issues with, at least with our platoon, as far as color or anything else. I mean, it was, and you made friends pretty easy, because if you needed money or this or that, that's who you went to. You couldn't go home and to the family and say, "Hey, Mom, I need some money."
It's outstanding. What was food like when you were in the barracks area?
I personally had never had meals like they had. I had, for Fridays, being Catholic, we had a can of sardines with a 10-cent sticker, and we passed around the can opener, and we had mac and cheese, crab mac and cheese. We didn't have a lot of money. I remember one time the government turned down from the packing houses, which were readily available here back then, hamburger, because they considered it too salty. A guy who worked there then could sell it. It was like $0.25 a pound, and although too salty, it was like, wow, look at the meat. So I didn't, well, all in all, it was just really good, and it was, of course, as well balanced and had everything, and I mean, it was really good. In fact, I never heard anybody complain. I think the only complaint is they felt we fell behind, so you went through the line, you got your meal, and then as you walked out the door, you dumped it in the trash. So, and I'm thinking, oh my God, look at this great food.
Now, when you were in the field, did they introduce you to C rations at that time?
Yes.
And can you tell us about the glories of C's?
Well, never use a bayonet to try to open the can, first of all. There were times it was cold, just out of the box. There was another time where they dumped them all in hot water, boiled them, and got them hot. And again, to me, it was good. People saying, this is terrible, whatever, but it was food.
Understood.
But people would complain about it, and we were out in the field too. Before they took us into the gas chamber, we had this wonderful meal. They brought out bins of hot food and all, just great. We ate, and then they took us into there, and then pretty much everybody came out and vomited, and that was it.
Okay, outstanding. Well, how was graduation?
Well, when I went in on my 4th day, they talked to people about signing up for another year, and I did that. And then the guys from OMSA saying, don't do it, Mahoney, and I did it. Then as we're getting ready to graduate 2 days before, they called me into headquarters. And they says, we've got a great deal for you. They go, how would you like to stay here in Delta Company for your complete tour? And I says, I signed up for an extra year. They said, see ya. So my mind's still spinning. Well, you're going to Vietnam anyway. So it was this trail that kept following me. So the graduation was just marching over, graduation, and that was it. It was being somewhat late to the airport, and the cab driver driving as fast as he could and running through the airport, and then going into United for a straight flight to Omaha. I believe it was a straight flight. The bad thing was they put us in first class, and there was probably, I guess, 4 or 6 of us. And being kind of, I want to say backward, but not having a lot of knowledge on a lot of things, they served a first class meal. And I wasn't sure what to do when they're offering things, so I didn't eat the meal. And then people I was with said, "Aren't you hungry?" And I was starving. I just said, "No, I'm not hungry." And a lot of things I missed just because of being what I felt was shy, being somewhat behind, and maybe embarrassing myself. So that was a challenge.
So you came back to Omaha before going to Fort Gordon?
Yes, I had 2 weeks leave, and then I went to Fort Gordon and for a communication center specialist, and I picked that not knowing anything about it when I signed up for next year, but it sounded like this would be a good education. You know, I learned something, maybe I could make something out of myself. And so we went in, and it was probably, I don't know if it'd be the world, it was 3 floors, and different than it was for basic. And they had 8 bunks, 8 bunks to each room, and they were beside each other, and your locker was in the middle. And then I had to go through all the security clearances to get in. And so got into that. Then it was you go to the mess halls for lunch and all that stuff, but you're mainly in school. And I knew how to type, so the teletype, which they started you out on, you had a week to learn it, and I zinged through it. Well, they moved me ahead a week, but then the test I had to do, a very, very simple test, it didn't register with me. So then I got held back 2 days and ended up with everybody I'd moved ahead of. Now I'm back with everybody. And went through the training and learned all of it. Made a very good friend from San Francisco, and he was from not San Francisco, from Los Angeles, and he knew everything that I hadn't even heard of. He's like a wealth of knowledge on drugs and everything else. Very good guy. And so he's my main buddy, was like a couple of us. And then we could go downtown and stuff like that. So it's more or less, here's your duty and here's PT and all of that. Still had KP. And that's how it was, and the weekends were off, and then just like full days during the week. Then it came time where you were done with the class and people started getting their orders. And some people got civilian status for Belgium, some got civilian status for Italy, some got civilian status for Germany. So we're waiting for the orders, because mine wasn't there. So I had to wait, maybe a week or 2 for my orders to come through, probably a couple weeks. And then I got my orders, and they were a little hard to read when I was reading, like, what are they saying? And they were saying RVN. So then I got it. I wasn't shocked. I wasn't surprised. And then I started thinking, well, you got sent back 2 days, then your orders got delayed, then they come here. So again, because of what I did, just fit into this succession.
And destiny followed.
Yeah, and that's how I felt. And so I got my orders and everything. So the day I'm processing out, I go down to process out. Got my flight for the next day and everything. And they look at my records and they says, "Oh, wait a minute." I go, "What?" They says, "You can't see." And I said, "I know." And they says, "Well, you got to have glasses." And I says, "Glasses aren't going to work." And she says, "Well, you got to go to the eye doctor." And I wasn't smart enough to take the base cab. I walked a long way, went to the eye doctor. He says, "You can't see. You're not going to be able to see a rifle." He's put all kind of stuff down. And I went back to see the lady, and it wasn't like, "Well, we could try to do eyeglasses." She says, "Well, you're going to have to stay." I go, "No. I got my flight. I got my orders. I've been here since March. It is now November. Just sign the papers. I'm leaving." So she signed the papers. I went and got my flight and headed to Omaha.
Wow. She came back to Omaha another 2 weeks before you went somewhere?
I had a month's leave, from there, and came back and went home, and I don't have a lot of knowledge about being back home. Saw some friends and stuff from Exorbitant. But I don't have a lot of remembering things. The thing I remember is the night before I left, my sister was married, came over, and all 8 kids were sleeping on the floor. I think she had a kid, and I think he was there, my little grandson, or nephew, and my mom was there, and they all slept on the floor, which didn't help me getting much sleep. And so the next morning I got up and went to the airport, and one of the guys who I met in basic, but from another company, he was from I want to say Greenland, not Greenland, in Nebraska, not far from here. And he says, "Are you going first class?" And I go, "No." He goes, "I got my ticket as soon as we landed." He says, "And they told me I had to go first class. There were no seats available at first class." I says, "Oh, I called a week ago and I got coach." So talked to him a little bit, got on, and I didn't get to say goodbyes because my brothers and sisters were young and they were running all over the place. They're like maybe 8 and 11, and they're all over. My mom's trying to get them together, and so I don't remember the goodbyes either. I just kind of got on the plane and that was it.
Okay. I seem to remember back in the 70s, early 70s and late 60s, Epley didn't even have a fence around it. You flew out of Epley?
Yes.
Okay. And in those days, Epley was still a small airfield. The jet stairs, they actually pushed the stairs up to the airplane. They didn't have the jet ways like they do now. Okay.
When my friend was leaving for the Air Force before I got drafted, he wanted to go out and kick the wheels because he saw a cartoon about it. So he wanted to go kick the wheels before he got on. That didn't happen. But yeah, you had the stairs, and boy, sometimes the weather was so bad, but you had the stairs to go up and down. So.
Wow.
Yeah.
So you started another journey.
Yep.
A long journey.
Yep.
And we're going to go there. How did that go?
Flew out, and you had to go to Oakland. There was no plane from Omaha, so I flew to San Francisco, and there was an Oakland helicopter, which isn't flying anymore. San Francisco Oakland helicopter, which is a large chopper, which would take you back and forth. And so I didn't see anybody I knew. There's no other people in the service, and so I figured out it was a helicopter. I went over there, flew over there, landed at Oakland, and there's a bus and there's other GIs, and so we kind of all got together, and so we all figured this is our bus. We're on the bus, we're waiting, and nobody ever came. And then somebody else came. They says, "Our bus is over there. It's going to be leaving." So we ran to get on the bus because we had to be there by noon. Got on the bus, and the first place they took us was to get new uniforms. And so we had to take off they gave us a box, take off everything we had, put in a box, told us what we could keep, and that was sent off. And then you went through the line to get your clothes. And they said, okay, we're about to the end here. The last 4 people or 5 people dressed will have to pull duty here.
No.
And I thought, there's no way. And my shoe was a 12. So I'm like at the end of the line on some of this stuff, and I thought, so then it looked, I kept counting, and like, oh God. So I just took all my remaining clothes and went outside and got dressed. And they just laughed and didn't say anything, so I avoided that. That got assigned to a barracks. That night went and they had a steak dinner, I remember, and had the steak dinner and just a lot of talking with the guys, you know, and meeting new people, and that was it. The next day we had to go and get together, and you had to pull duty. Everybody had to pull a duty, unless there was some reason they had to pull you out. So they're going down, looking at everybody. This person got pulled out for this, or this person got pulled out for that. They came up to me and a couple of guys. You guys need a haircut. It's like, thank God, you know, I don't have to pull a KP or anything. So I went and got a haircut, came back, and then they announced, if you're not on a flight, you will pull duty, including KP. So I'm sweaty, and, you know, I want to go to Vietnam, please, please. And I know there's some other guys right there, they don't do KP. And so I was one of those who got a flight. They took us over to a building that was locked. And they had bunks, they had phones you could pick up to call home or whatever. And the bunks were real close together, and that's where we stayed. In the morning, we'd march to breakfast. They kept a real close eye on everybody. Lunch, you'd march to breakfast. Dinner, you'd march to breakfast. That was it. And I did that, I believe, for 2 days. And then they announced our flight, gave us orders, and my flight was R2B3. And they took us on a bus to the airfield there. I can't think of the name, darn it. And marched us on a plane. Just got on a plane and took a seat. It was Airlift International, and when you got on the plane, it was panels of different colors, and you could, you know, it was just a chart. It was just kind of put together. So it made me a little nervous because about 2 weeks before then, a flight to Vietnam crashed as they left Alaska, and there were some civilians on it, and some people got killed, some got injured. So we took off. We flew to Alaska, was our first stop, and we had to get out and go in. They were going to refuel and everything, and most of us were running down the taxiway trying to slide in our jungle boots, which didn't slide well. So we were out on the taxiway, and they were kind of like, you got to get in the building. Went in the building, and as I am going in, they're making an announcement. For those of you on this flight, we are holding the bar open if you want to come and have a drink. And I'm thinking, I'm not old enough. And most of us weren't old enough to go and have the drink. And I remember they had a huge polar bear when you walked in. They had TVs for a quarter if you wanted to watch TV. And then pretty soon they got us on the plane, and we left. And landing, you could really hear the brakes, everything squeal, so it made me a little nervous. And we flew to an air base in Japan. And got off there, and that was a longer time. And I remember getting off with, I'd say everybody getting off was quiet. There wasn't much being said. There were GIs coming back from Vietnam, many in their jungle fatigues. They were dirty, they were filthy. They more or less were in their own world, is what it seemed. There was one who came up to me and said something to the effect of, it'll be okay or something. Other than that, I don't remember even really talking to anybody or anything. And so after that, they got us on the plane and we flew to Benoit Air Base. And we got there and it landed, they brought the air stairs, they opened the door, and immediately you feel the heat as it's coming through the door. This hot heat and the smell, and red clay you could see, and dust. And they came in with a camera crew, and they had the camera and they had big lights, and they got into about where you would call the first class session. Somebody screamed, "Bloody murder, get out of here, get out of here, they're gonna kill us." And there was mass panic on the plane. I think the guy got knocked down with the camera, and people were trying to jump over the seats, and just mass panic for people to get out. Went from there and went inside, and I guess you would call it the terminal. It's just a big area, open. They had ceiling fans, and you got your luggage, got on a duffel bag, got on a bus with windows with wires on it, and they took you into 90th replacement for processing. And part of processing, they gave you a tube of school kids used to get with grit in it, and it had the pink pills and a toothbrush. And they took you to like a water trough, and the water was non-potable. It says, do not drink the water, you're going to get sick. And got over there and you had to chew the pill, and then you had to take the toothbrush and get it wet and brush your teeth and get all the pink off. And they were there saying, remember, you're not going to, who knows when you're going to see a dentist. It's going to be a long time. Get the red off, get the red off. I was so thirsty, I thought, I got to drink. So I drank some of it. I wasn't the only one, but I mean, by then I don't even remember getting anything to drink. And so after that, we did the in-processing, and went to the barracks. They were 2 stories that they had there. And got there, got our stuff put in there, and then we went to chow. And it was called Alice's Restaurant. So we went there, had chow, I got a big glass of milk, and went to take a chug, and it was spoiled. I remember that. And so we ate, and then I'd hooked up with a couple guys, and we're talking, so now we're like best buddies. We're walking around, and I'm seeing people from Des Moines that I went to school with. I'm seeing people from Basic that I went with, and other guys are seeing me. So it's like this crowd gets bigger and bigger, and we're just all talking with each other, where they're from, and again, they're your family. I mean, to me, they were my family. Nobody else was.
Sure.
And that night we went in and hit the bunks, pitch black in the barracks, and all of a sudden, all hell broke loose. Machine gun fire, explosions, and unbelievable. It's like midnight, whatever, and a couple people fell. The bunk, they had bloody noses and everything, and somebody came in and hit the lights. They go, it's New Year's Eve, it's New Year's Eve. You know, they're just celebrating, it's New Year's Eve, you know. And it was kind of mass panic, you know, because there was a lot of people who had no idea what was going on. The next morning, they came and said you had orders, and the people there that I was hanging with, nobody got orders yet, so it's kind of saying goodbyes, and I'm losing my friends. A deuce and a half comes, I got my orders, whatever they are, jump in the back of a deuce and a half, he says, get in the back. And he drove for a while, and he dropped me off at the headquarters for the 24th Evacuation Hospital. And so I went in, and the top sergeant was there, and I gave my orders. He goes, starts yelling at me, what in the hell are you doing here? We don't need you. You don't have anything to offer us. why did they bring you here? I said, I don't know. He goes, well, we don't need you. He called somebody up. He says, take him down where the others are at the POW compound. So he took me down to the POW compound, and there were 4 round Quonset huts surrounded by wire fencing, concertina wire, and spotlights that went off at night, but the gates were open. So I met a couple guys there who were there, and they had no hooches available. So there was probably like 4 or 5 bunks in the whole place, and you just tossed everything on the floor, and that was my home. That day they showed me, here's where you go to latrines. Here around here they got shower tubes with a little partition to hide your midsection if you gotta take a piss. Let's go have chow. Here's how chow works. Here's malaria pills you take every day or once a week. Take it. You're gonna get sick the first time. The book goes for a full year, just mark for the whole year. Then had chow and everything, and it was, the mess hall was a screen door, and they had screens about halfway or higher up, and they had ceiling fans. One had chow there, and then next day, another guy who was off duty showed me around a little more, and had chow, and still was just staying there. Then the guy said, "Come on, we're gonna go. There's a NCO club." And it was just a shack built for the NCOs. He goes, "Don't worry, we got orders for you." So they dummied orders up so I could get into NCO club, and they all had orders. There was actually an American band there, little band, and one of the songs was, I think it was a Mick Jagger song, "We Got to Get Out of This Place If We Ever," and that's what they were singing, and people were bawling, and they're singing this song, and and I'm just so confused at this point. And then they went and I kept having beer, more and more beer, and I had all these beers, and I'm drinking, and I'm not a drinker. I'm drinking as fast as I can, and as soon as I put one down, they're pushing another one, and I'm drinking and drinking. Finally, I'm just totally fucking drunk. I have never been drunk like that. And so we're going back to the POW compound, and they got all the guys who are literally dragging me back in the red clay and the rocks and everything, and kind of tossed me on my bunk. And probably maybe 3 o'clock in the morning, I had to pee so bad, and I couldn't stand up. And so I crawled on my side outside of where the Quonset huts were, laid on my side, and took a pee. And I didn't care if anybody saw me. I just couldn't stand. And then we had another guy who had come in, and so I got to go with them on. That was how all the new guys got. And so I got to go with him, but they were mad at him. They always kind of held it against him because he didn't drink. He had a couple beers and that was it. He didn't pass muster. So about the 4th day, they came and got me. The night before. Well, the night before they came, says, "We got your orders. You're going to work in the A&D. And it's going to be down here for Quonset huts, whatever." And I said, okay. And they said, "You have to be there at 7. Don't be late." I said, okay. And I only know this little area. And the thing I knew is you never wear your ball cap. You never salute officers, and you don't call them sir or ma'am.
Okay.
Although that was kind of done in the hospital, the actual hospital. So I went and I opened the door, and here was a small room with a radio, and people through this opening were on stands, and they had, I guess people would call them stretchers, we call them litters, on each stand. And there were litters on the floor, and more are coming in. And then I get yelled at, answer the radio, answer the radio. I had no fucking idea what I was going to do. I don't know what I said, and then they tell me all this stuff. And the guy who's yelling at me to answer the radio says, "What do they got? What do they got?" And I says, "I have no idea what they said." He was furious at me. He goes, "Take this and see that guy right there. You go get this information from him. Do it now." And so I heard him go back to the radio. So I go in, and there's a guy laying there, and his head's bleeding and it's open. And I go up to him, and I kind of looked at what I'm supposed to do, and there's a band, which I didn't know what to do, and I was looking, and I decided the silver tray was my tray. That was my tray to put my stuff on so I could do all this. But there was stuff on it. So I picked it all up and I moved it to a little ledge. Shit hit the fan because that was sterile instruments. He had got shot in the head from friendly fire, and they were going to do it there, and he wasn't going to go into OR. I have no knowledge of the rest of the day. Nothing. I have no knowledge of it, other than they told me, this will be your duty assignment. Your hours will be military time, 7 at night to 0700 in the morning. And you'll report here. And then one of the guys pulled me aside and he says, "I feel really bad for you." He goes, "You have no clue about anything, what's going on, no training." He goes, "I feel really bad for you because you have no idea what you're in for." He goes, "My first day," he goes, "No, I had training. My first day, the Benoit got hit, and some airmen were running, and they jumped over to get behind the sandbags. They had wounded, and they brought him in. As I was getting a stretcher off to put it on the gurney, a boot fell off. I went down and picked up the boot, and there was a foot in it." He goes, "That was my first day." So that night, I went back, and a lot of the guys, or a number of the guys, there was a small number, were on duty, so there's maybe one other person with me. And I didn't know what to do. I mean, my mind can't process it. And it's like, it went from that to, people are going to die because of me. And I felt that way coming over in the plane. People are going to die because I can't see, and they're going to put me out there and I won't be able to see to shoot. Here, other people are going to die because I have no idea what I'm doing, and seeing all of this. And they told me to take the next day. Do not come the next day. And the guy did tell me, he told me about it. He says, "I was told also not to come today." Everybody, they tell that after the first day. So the first day I went back, that I could go back, and I went in, and from that period of time until I believe it was the 17th of January, it's blank. I have no idea. I was there, but I can't tell you anything. On the 17th of January, a gunship came in, and they had wounded. And I was one who went out. There was 2 wounded, there's 2 choppers, 2 wounded. And the one that I went to had armament on it. So I climbed up over the ornament and was trying to get the guy out. The others were getting the other guy out. got him on a stretcher and wheeled him in. Got him on the stand, and he had a bullet in his head, and he was a Vietnamese. And they came and they got me and they said, Mahoney, you're going to do the ambu bag. You do not leave his side. Here's what you do. Where he goes, you go. And so I started doing the ambu bag, and I'm getting, kind of spraying blood out and doing that. And I went to x-ray with him and that, and I came back. And he can't be more than 15 years old. I mean, he's this kid. And to me, our guys are kids. And it's like, I'm supposed to have all this hate. I'm supposed to hate him. And I'm looking at him, and it's going through my head as I'm doing this. Well, you're keeping the enemy alive. You're not there for our guys. And another side says, well, he's got a family. Our kid's got a family. I was so confused about it. Eventually, they moved him on to a ward, and I was done. And went through the rest of the night. The next day I went to duty and got a call came in for me. And there was an investigation on. Oh no, a call came in and I answered. I'd answered it the night before. And they wanted to know who came in. What was their condition? Well, the one guy had his heel shot off, that was it. This guy had this. Was he going to make it? All these questions, and I'm trying to answer, and that was it. The next day, when I came on duty, they says, you're going to be getting a call. And I got a call, and ripped up one side and down the other. I gave out classified information. I'm not supposed to say anything about a POW. I'm not supposed to say how they got here. Nothing about it at all, ever, to anybody, even about Americans. You don't say anything. And I mean, that seemed to be it. A number of days later, my friend that I met was an OR tech. And at this point in time, he's working on not in the OR tech, which he eventually went to, but he's working on the ward. And he called me by field phone. He goes, Mick, he's dead. And I said, who? He goes, the POW. He goes, he's dead now. And I says, okay. I says, how did he die? Knowing, I mean, he was
in a bad way to start with.
And he told me, I killed him. And I'm like, you killed him? How could you kill him? And I'm so confused. And he says, his IVs, they told me to turn all his IVs up, and all of that put him in shock, and he died. I go, why? He goes, we needed the bed. And in my time there were two other POWs. Before I move, I know I was going to say, those POWs that came in were Chuhoi. And they did not know they were Chuhoi, and so they got shot at. Two other POWs that three. One was, his stomach was hanging out in that, and he was very ill. They didn't know if he was going to make it. And the other one was covered in frag wounds. The last one, I knew there were a couple POWs brought in, and one was an officer. And I was over there with him, and he was going to fight. All of a sudden he was going to fight. And he had wounds, but he's going to fight. And he reached over and he got a scalpel. And so we're there, and I'm one of them. We're trying to get him. We're trying to not get knifed. We're trying to get him down, trying to get restraints on him. And our interpreter was there that night, and he's yelling and yelling in Vietnamese, and I'm assuming, because they're telling him what to say, and he's saying it. And then after this fight with 6 people, they're trying to contain this person, we finally did. Mm-hmm. So those were my times, my experience with POWs.
So I'm going to stop you for a moment. We're just going to take a break and kind of breathe. I'm going to keep you on camera. We're going to keep talking, but we're going to kind of take a break here for a second. I'm going to ask you to explain what a Chu Hoi is so that our future audience will understand the term.
Chu Hoi was someone who surrendered. And what the Americans did, they flew around and dropped these pamphlets. And the pamphlets say, basically, surrender and come over to this side and we'll take care of you, whatever it said. But these 2 POWs, the one who shot in the head, they had that because they wanted to surrender and come over. And that's what a Chu Hoi is.
Sure.
And I did forget to say there was one other POW, which was an American POW. The Vietnamese had came and left him on this road, and Americans got him. They flew him to our hospital, and you read that there was a POW, and that I don't know if they said the Vietnamese gave him or whatever, North Vietnamese, but we got him. And they had him at the hospital, and he was under tons of guards. No one could really get near to him, and not nurse and a doctor and his guards. What we did in return, or the Americans did in return, they took 4 prisoners, Vietnamese, and took them and left them at that spot. Mm-hmm. People who were there, or what came back to us, is that they did not want to be left there, and they were basically being told they're crying. They do not want to be left.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Okay. So the way your tour started off really ugly. You had no training, you had no familiarization or orientation with the unit mission, the unit requirements, nothing that would prepare you for the environment in which you were going to be. Yeah, and so you were literally thrown in the deep end with no floaters. You were there by yourself and just doing the best you could to deal with a situation that seemed maybe insane or an awful lot to handle, right? And so we get that, and that is hard. As you proceeded through your tour, did you find yourself becoming more numb, or did you find yourself becoming more experienced and ready to deal with some of the concerns that you were seeing as your tour progressed?
Before I go there, I just want to talk about the POW shot in the head.
We can do that.
I had written a letter. In my letter, I said it very briefly. And at the end of the letter, I said, I made myself look at him. Mm-hmm. Because if it was one of our guys, I can't look and run. Mm-hmm. I have to be there. As things progressed, I was struggling big time, and I come to find out that was normal. And there was jokes being made, and I didn't understand them, and people were had a laugh, and I didn't understand them. And there was this, I guess would coincide with this, there was this episode where I was on guard duty, and I was in the back room of where I worked, because they gave you a M14 no bullets. You stayed around where you worked because choppers come in, and even though you're on guard duty, you have to be there. And I heard the radio go off, but I didn't hear anybody answer it. So it went off again, and I went out there. Our call sign was Queen Tonic. White Minnow is the ones who directed choppers by specialty, and they had, I believe it was four or six wounded. Mm-hmm. Their ETA was 2 minutes. And we had a helper who was wounded Arvin, and he didn't speak English, but he went, I told him what I needed, he went and got the litters, got everything. I grabbed people outside, people are still out, get them, get over to the chopper, and the chopper's landing. So we're getting people out. Many times it doesn't matter if they're dead or alive, they just dumped them on each other just to get them in. Mm-hmm. So we're doing that. And then all of a sudden the guy's head falls in my hand. Oh. And I look down and his brains are in my hand. Mm-hmm. So got him on the litter and got him in. And did the other things I did. And then I went and had to also do his valuables. As I went through his valuables, there was a card. And the card was orange and black drawing, funny card. And inside it said, "Just think, honey, in 37 days, I'm going to be home." Mm-hmm. And I'm thinking, honestly, who am I? You know, I'm doing this, I'm not smart, and these people are dying. And I'm the one who should be dead. And it never got better about that. It's this guilt. And there was a doctor around at that time, and he patted me on the back, and he wanted to know if I was okay. Mm-hmm. And I told him I was. And then a doctor and several others talked to me, not that night, but talked to me and said, "If you can't deal with this, you are no good to us. If you're not here, people are going to die. These things are going to happen. Mm-hmm. And we need every person we've got." And he says, "So you got to make a decision, the kind of person you're going to be for us." And then I kind of understood what the joking was. Like, one was, they were going to write letters to the lettuce growers. It was all the lettuce growers' fault because they came up with bags for lettuce. Had they not come up with bags for lettuce, we wouldn't have dead and we wouldn't have body bags. That was one of the things they would talk about in writing the lettuce growers. Oh. There was a song that wasn't sung loud, but somebody had told me what the song was. Is "Mickey Bags the Body 10 Days Old," and it would kind of go in your head, and it was kind of, believe it or not, bring some kind of light, you know, because your mind's going crazy. And where I was at is where it all began. I was admissions and dispositions. You go into hospital, that's admissions and dispositions, they call you in. I did it. Mass casualties, I did armbands, GI number 1, GI, or unknown GI 1, unknown GI 2, and I gave them a number to trace their blood and everything. Mm-hmm. And those bands we put on them and on their file, and that's how they were known. Then you had the ER. And then they went from ER, some went very quickly to surgery, some went to pre-op. And then you had surgery, and then post-op, and then hopefully eventually they would go to a ward. Our specialty was maxillofacial and head. The 93rd evac closed on right around early April. In March, we now became the burn center, which they were. And what they did is they divided one of the wards in half, and everything was behind glass. But of course, nothing is sterile in Vietnam. We got in a guy with a gunshot wound to the head. He was on long bed, from what I recall. And so I'm there trying to band him and trying to put things together, and there's a doctor and a corpsman, and here comes a nurse and everything. He was playing Russian roulette, and the gun went off. And he lived there for 3 hours. And my head's, after it's over, it's just spinning. There's people back home, and every day they're wondering, where are you at? What are you doing? Are you okay? And you play Russian roulette, and you're dead. And what are they going to tell the parents? How are they going to tell the family? That same night, got in an urgent urology case involving circumcision. Brought in the kid. I remember his blonde. Brought him in. I'm with him, getting information. I'm the one who cuts off clothes and boots. And they get down, they get his pants off. They get his shorts off. His penis is extremely large and swollen, and at the very end it's just all bloody and messy, and the doctors are coming over and things are going, and they're doing all these things, and they really rush him into surgery. And at times they would come out, and generally people like this, more times than not. And for him, they came out and they said, we are flying him to the States. We're getting him on a plane as soon as we can. The reason all this happened with the circumcision, he has leukemia. And so they were going to fly him back. Later that same day, there was in the hospital a guy who had pneumonia. He was considered very seriously ill and questionable. And I got the information. His wife was flying into Vietnam and was going to be there the next morning. And it was amazing. I mean, I don't know how they did it. I don't know how she got there. But that's happened.
I was going to say, that's unusual. I've never heard of
Extremely
that.
unusual.
Wow.
Extremely unusual.
Wow.
And I got the letter, I wrote it.
If you like, you can go through and
No.
take it out for us if you'd like to share. I know you have lots of things there you'd like to share with us, but let's do these things in the order you're willing to tell us. So if there's something
by
there,
heart.
sure.
And it's original paper, it's a letterhead of the
Hold
hospital.
it up for us. We'll let Nick take
That's
just
a
a quick shot.
letterhead, and not the letterhead, this is progress notes they used. And they got the stamp 24th of back. And I would find different paper to write on.
Okay.
So that's what that is. Got a call, got casualties coming in, and I believe there were 4, wounded coming in. There were 4. You don't know the status. You don't know really much of anything. And what they call in can be deceiving. So they come in, and again, I didn't have help, and I'm grabbing somebody. At that time, the hospital had conjunctivitis, which is really pink eye, and a lot of people had it. So I was basically the person there. I had the Vietnamese helper, and got the call, got people rounded up besides him, got out there and got them in. I was the last one to come in. As I'm come in, one person they said was questionable, dead, alive. It was my call. I said, we'll take him in. Because I'm thinking if he's alive. So we bring him in, and as I'm going through this big double door, going into the ER, a corpsman stopped me and literally screamed at me, what in the hell are you doing? Why are you bringing him here? And I tried to explain it, and he opened like a poncho, and the poncho liner, he says, take him around the side and put him in the morgue. Get him in the morgue and get in here. So, got him in the morgue, went in and did my usual thing, cutting off clothes and doing what I could do. And then I was told, there's a guy on a litter laying on the floor. He says, go take his, he was dead. He says, go take his false teeth out. I said, no. And they says, we're telling you to go and take his false teeth out. So I went and took his false teeth out. Then the corpsman came and got me, and he tossed me a pair of gloves. And he said, you're coming with me. We're going to bag that soldier. I said, no. He says, you're going to bag it. I says, I am not going to bag him. He says, you don't have a choice. Get your ass into the morgue with me. I never, up to this point, didn't matter how much blood I had on me or on my jungle fatigues, had never had any cover on anything. This time I was told to wear gloves. We went in, he was in the morgue, and he had been laid down when I was there on the floor of the morgue, on the litter, and he was covered. Got another litter and laid it next to him with a body bag open. Mm-hmm. He opened up the poncho. And this was a black GI. He opened up the poncho, and then he opened up the liner. They were on an APC, and it flipped. Mm-hmm. He was cut open, split open from here all the way down, mm-hmm. and it was separated. Mm-hmm. And so the first thing was I had to cut off all his clothes, and he also helped. Got his clothes and everything off him. Then the body bag was right next to him. We lifted him up and we placed him in the body bag. After that, we had to go back and we had to pick up his insides, mm-hmm. and pick all that up and bring it back and sit them there, mm-hmm. until we got all we could get. Mm-hmm. And my mind's, what I remember is racing again, because he's dead, the same as the guy whose brains are in my hand. They're dead. Nobody knows they're dead. I know they're dead. I'm here. I'm saying prayers for these people. I'm angry it wasn't me, and I think of their families and the hurt they've got back there. And that's going to be a couple days before they know anything. And that was it, and we left. So part of being there first, being the ER, also did the people to the morgue. Anything that needed to be done in that realm or more, we did. Mm-hmm. Clear to the end of bagging bodies. I'm going to change the subject a little bit.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
About my,
let me know if this stops. Thank you.
About my second month or so, a guy was leaving, and they says, And part of our job was every night we had a mimeograph machine where you type and make like a stencil, and we run out. A guy was there, and he would run out all these copies that would go to the United States and all over the place of who came in, what they had, everything about that day. And I was told that I had a new function. My function was a 24-hour report. At 24 hours, every ward, pre-op, everyone had to have a report. Mm-hmm. And I had to collect that report, come back, look at the report, and add in all that stuff into a daily total. Mm-hmm. I walked around twice about it, walked with the guy and did it. And then he was short timer, he left. I went and I picked up the report from each ward and I sat down. It was midnight. I had to do everything I could from crying. I didn't know math, add and subtract or anything. And Wide Minnow, who the report went into, who's also directed choppers, kept calling me, says, they're furious. The report's not here. So finally, I think around 3 o'clock in the morning, I called in to report the best I could. And the next night, somehow it was a little bit easier, and I kept looking at the reports he had done. And the report was, pre-op's got these people, and here's what it is. Post-op's got these people. Here's how many people died. Here's how they died. We got 10 FUOs, fever of unknown origin. FUO, we just call them FUOs, fever of unknown origin. So many amputations, traumatic amputations where their hand or foot got blown off. Head injuries, to cover just about anything that happened in the hospital that day, and then I would call it in, and that was my new job. And when I left there, sounds stupid, I never could do math for a long time, but I could do math. I figured that out there. So I had to do that. So that was the part I inherited, I guess. We had an interpreter, and he was young, I don't know how young, and he talked to me quite a bit about how bad Americans were. And they had the French, and now they had the Americans, and the Americans were very much like the French in treatment of them, and he named different things why. And I would help him with his English. He would go and, what does this mean? Because he was always studying English. And one day I went with our Vietnamese helper who did speak English, and we had to go do something clear across the hospital. And as we go, he grabs my hand, and he's swinging it and laughing, just talking my ear off. I have no idea what's going on. I'm thinking, he likes me, you know? And so then on the way back, the same thing. It's like, gosh, people are probably looking saying, he's queer, you know? I mean, my mind's going, I just shook his hand, or shake his hand, went in, and then I went to the interpreter. I says, I think he likes me. He goes, yeah, he likes you. I said, no, I think he likes me. He goes, no. And he goes, no, that's our custom. That's our custom. He goes, he does. He really likes you. He goes, the Vietnamese really like you. And I go, why? You know, he says, you, like, if he needed, he wouldn't even ask for cigarettes. I would buy him cigarettes, or I would do something. And he says, you're kind to him. he goes, you're kind to me. When we bring in Vietnamese, you're kind to them. And he goes, the French weren't, There are Americans who's not kind. He goes, but you're kind. And then I started looking. I went one day going back to my hooch, and these Vietnamese women are talking, and they're pointing to me, and they got their kids, and they're doing work at the hooches. And I says, what is she saying about me? And I said, she's laughing at me. She goes, no, she's not. She goes, we all like you. I go, why? She says, you come over, you hold our kids, and you talk to our kids, and blah, 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 blah. I got an old-time popcorn maker with a lid. It's like, well, I don't really want a popcorn popper, and I broke the lid anyway. Well, they had seen it with the lid on it. So the mom and son came and says, can we have that? I go, sure. I go, the lid's broke. No, can we have it? I go, yeah. I gave it to him. Seen it every day, cooking rice and their chicken and everything else. So they made good use of it.
Good.
The hospital did a lot of cleft palates and cleft lips of the Vietnamese kids. They went to orphanages, got them inoculated, and did that. We had a 30-year-old girl who came in with a bullet, an inch or so inside of her brain. We had a mama son who came in, and she was unconscious, and her stomach was split open and her insides were hanging out, and she was alive. I don't know what happened with her. There was an instance where they had a mama son, and they were tendency Vietnamese small breasts, and she was bigger and big breasts, and the doctor's over there pinching her nipple, like squeeze it and turn it and turn it. And I'm kind of, we get this smile, and it's an embarrassed smile. I'm kind of watching this, and he goes over to the other, and doctor's twisting. And I kind of like, this isn't right. So I go to another doctor, and says, Doc, he's playing with her. He goes, what do you mean? I go, he's twisting her nipple, he's playing with her nipples. And he's bust out laughing. He goes, God, no. He goes, that is the most sensitive part of a body, and he is trying to get a reaction. That is why he's pinching and twisting it, and he's not getting one. Well, then I saw his GIs came in, and they were unconscious, whatever. They would do the same thing. But I didn't know any better, and it was just kind of like...
You gotta learn these things.
Yeah. It was crazy. Am I talking too much?
No, not at all. What I'd like to say, though, is I'm going to interject for a moment.
Sure.
You're telling great stories, and we need to hear these things. I would like to explore a little bit. So the nature of your job was pretty much specifically extreme care, totally emergent, right? And
yes.
Almost everything you did was
yes.
that form. And you had no training whatsoever. So you're doing some of the hardest work we have to do, and you're working with people who generally you're never going to see the outcome. Right? And that's hard, friend or foe. It's human wreckage that you're dealing with. And you're trying to do the best you can to help take care of people in probably what's going to be the worst moments and maybe even the last moments of their life. And I want you to know that I appreciate that service, especially for many reasons, being combat arms. And I'm shocked that we didn't have some kind of training program for people who were going to perform in those environments. I can tell you now we do, and there's resiliency training accompanying that, because we know we're going to see horrible things. We've learned a lot over the years, but then we weren't quite so enlightened. You've talked a lot about the difficulty of that. I'm going to ask you to pull back from that for a few minutes and just tell us about being in Vietnam when you weren't in the midst of that all the time. I know that you had moments, maybe you got over and had a drink or two, maybe you did other things. So if you could tell me a little more about that and a little bit more about your experience with the Vietnamese, because that demonstrates not only that we're taking care of people, who are in horrible situations. But it also demonstrates, and I love that you talked about the kindness, the goodwill, the charity of the United States service member is a wonderful thing. And so I want you to talk a little bit more about that, because that is an important part of the story. And thank you for starting to share it with us, your experiences and relationships with Vietnamese as a result. That's marvelous. Tell us a little bit more about that.
Well, my duty was 7 days a week, 7 at night to 7 in the morning. There were times I was walking by or heard a lot of choppers or kind of got a call, we're really busy over here, that I would go there. So I would get off at 7 in the morning, or 7 at night. I would go and have chow. That would be breakfast. I'd go back, maybe have a beer, talk to some people who were on the night shift like I was, or the 7 to 7. And then eventually I'd go hit the rack, which was in the hooch, and my first was just a small room, and it had louvers and a screen. No air, none of that.
Okay.
Crap. And he had the sandbanks at the side. Eventually I had my hooch mate. He would get me up at 1 o'clock. I'd go and walk up to the latrines, which was a ways away, take a shower, get ready, and then I would go to chow again. And then at midnight was the third for us. And if you had that shift, that would be your third meal of the day.
So they ran 4 meals a day, but you would do these 3 or those 3?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay.
So if you, let's say if you're just not on duty and walking around, they just say, nope, there's a door. The person who ended up being my friend came from a wealthy family. I consider myself coming from a poorer family. And I was amazed because I learned about his brother and all this stuff, all that, and he borrowed money from me. Not so after I met him, and I was just, oh my God, this is the first time I ever had money to lend somebody. And then Black Spec 5 I reported to came, and he needed a lot of money, and asked me if he could borrow it, and he'd give it back to me next payday or whatever, and I did. I didn't think much about it. Didn't think much about getting it back. I never even thought about it, really. And then he came and gave me the money and thanked me. He didn't know what he'd done if I would have jumped in. So everyone's your brother. And it was, I look at some of these letters when I was going through things, and it's like, I'm writing letters when I was over there about family and stuff, and now that I look at them and I'm older, it's like, why did you say, I mean, it was good what I said, but now it's like, why did you say that? On some things. It would be different now that I'm older. The Vietnamese, I would, kids were great. We loved kids. There was a chopper. I'm gonna see if I got this picture here handy. Here's the family.
Okay.
This family came in. The father was in Arvin. The mother was in the car and she was pregnant, and their kids were in the car. They got hit by the VC. They got him to the hospital. The mother had a bullet close to the baby. The father had been shot. The kids all had some kind of shrapnel wound. So they went into surgery, and we became the babysitters. What are you going to do with the kids? Well, we became the babysitters, and as you can tell, we loved kids. The kids were there. One of the guys who knew people in the mess hall, he went up and got them different kinds of food to eat and got them ice cream and stuff like that. And so they were eating, taking turns with the kids, holding the kids. And they came out and said the baby was fine. It was a near term, and that the father was fine. So this was like, what a great event. I mean, we were just like, and I did put it on 24th VAC website, and it stirred an interest of a nurse who had a little black and white picture. And it's like, who is he? Where did he get all these pictures? But hasn't been any communication. I said, I was trying to explain to her, but yeah, so I did that. And then we had another instance, which was, if we can find this real quick. This, which I don't know if you can see very good, there's a baby being born, and it was in a little back room at the end of the ER. You can see there's like 6, whatever. And my hooch mate, who for some reason must have stayed on duty longer, was there, and I'm at the very front, now I'm by myself, he's yelling, Mahoney, she's having, hurry, come back here. Well, I couldn't leave. And he's yelling and yelling, Mahoney, come back here. So I took pictures of all the people involved and of the kids. And then, let's see. Sorry about that.
It's okay. Take your time, and the interview's on. This has been going great.
Picture of me holding the baby.
Oh.
And that's just my best picture.
That's beautiful.
So.
That's beautiful.
That was, and if I remember correctly, she was a mama sign and she got bit by a dog. So she was coming in, we got to know her, sweet it could be, and she came in, she would get her rabies shot in her arm. And I mean, it's like old home week every day or whenever she had to come in for her shots. And then she had the baby, and then went back to having shots, but then they were in her stomach. So, we got real familiar with her.
We got her taken care of.
Yep.
It's surreal sometimes, the bad things that happen as opposed to the good things that happen, and you're sitting astride events like that. And you're riding a roller coaster too, aren't you? But it's good that you can find moments in a tour like that where you can have some sense of, if not normalcy, at least celebration. And so I think that's marvelous that you are capturing this in your story for us. It's not all bad. It can be bad, but it's not all bad. And that's good.
Well, one of the restaurants I worked at was Rose Lodge,
right,
which was a chicken restaurant. And before they started work, the waitresses in the kitchen, and we would cook stuff for me. And I get a big box, and I go in, and the day shift was there, of course. Get ready to get off. They're like, "We've been waiting for you. You got a box. Would you open it? Because they knew what was going to be inside of it. So I'd open the box, and it was just full of any kind of cake, cookies, or desserts you could imagine.
Sure.
And so they ate it. We actually had people coming into the ER who grabbed some. It was just kind of a fun time, and see them how excited they were. And then Halloween, Easter, my mom went to see the guy who I had met in Fort Gordon, Georgia. She had met his wife at the airport. She went out, she had 14 kids.
Oh, wow.
And they had one of those old buses that look taxi cabs, or square taxi cabs with all these doors so everybody could get in it at one time. And she went out there, and they all got together for Easter. So I got this huge Easter basket and box full of all kinds of Easter candy, big stuffed rabbit, and all this. So the nurses took to the rabbit. They did put a head bandage on him since we were head, and candy just was there and went. And then they came and saw me, and they said, can we have the stuffed animal? We're going to an orphanage. So I go, sure. Halloween came around. tons of Halloween candy in a basket, same thing, and got some other stuffed animals. So as I got stuffed animals, they took the stuffed animals and they went to the orphanage with them.
Wow.
So, and I wasn't, maybe I wasn't adventurous, but I was zonked every night. I didn't say, can I go to the orphanage or can I go? I was just pretty much, I don't know, just zonked. Kind of like, another day's coming, and you know, it was 100% routine. I got off, I had chow, maybe a beer or two, talked to people, a couple hours, went to bed, or I'd read a book a little bit, hit the rack, get up again, take a shower, start all over again. I mean, it was just that. And other people went, and they went places or that, and I didn't. And if I showed you any of this, I'm sorry.
You're fine.
This is a hospital.
Mm-hmm.
So that's the hospital. And there's a helipad.
There you go.
And this is for you to keep.
Oh, thank you.
And then on the back is labeling of what each place was. So like there's a POW compound I stayed at first.
Okay, I'm going to go ahead and put that up here with the markings as well for just a moment. So you see the helipads at the top of the compound there. Okay, great.
And as
So can you point out once more just where did you stay and where did you work?
right here, the second building over was me, connected to, I was right here in this building, the ER, and all of the wards were connected in the middle with a walkway. And then when you go over here, it was a walkway all in the middle. Movies would be shown here at night. I couldn't barely see them, but they had no projector. And then, like, not till after I got there, the nurses did a skit and the donut dollies on Laugh-In.
Okay.
And then all the patients who could get out were along here to watch Laugh-In.
Marvelous.
And then my hooch ended up being like right here.
Okay.
And then you got the latrines were here, enlisted NCO officer.
All right. And once again, where did you dine? Is the dining facility
This
on
is the mess hall.
Okay, I see it now.
And it was, to me, it was large. And I do not know if they cooked meals and sent them out or not.
Okay.
And they may have, I don't know.
Marvelous.
And when you look at the picture,
Okay.
you see the helipad.
Right.
Here's a large helipad, there's a chopper on it. Here is across from it is a little road, and there's another helipad. So if a chopper came in all shot up, after we got the patients off, it would go over here.
Okay.
And these are ones that are flyable. And they would go over here, and then they would come and get them. You can't see very well, but there's 50-gallon drums over here. 50-gallon drums of herbicide.
Okay.
And so we would wade through it, and the choppers would come in who sprayed and load up around 3:34 in the morning.
They'd load up herbicide?
Yes.
So you had herbicide in the middle of a hospital compound.
Yes.
That is interesting to me that you would use those pads for that purpose within a hospital. Now, again, maybe we were getting smarter. We probably would have that separated. We'd have hazardous materials at a different location than where we're loading and unloading patients. But that's just very interesting to me that would all be so proximate to each other.
There now
Seems like a no-brainer now, but it probably wasn't then.
Long Bend got a very high dumping of Agent Orange, and the choppers had to be empty before they came in. There's a stream that ran into a lake, and they would drop it in the stream.
Oh my goodness.
They were going to the lake. So we drank it, we showered in it, we ate in it. Anything connected with water, we did. There are a number of people from the hospital with cancer. There are a number of birth defects for people who served at the 24th with birth defects.
Yeah. let me ask then, have you suffered effects? And do you have a rating that reflects that?
They just gave me the one for coronary artery disease, because I have had that for years and years, and they just opened that up. I haven't done anything with it yet, but yesterday I had a CT scan. I have a growth on my lungs, and they're watching it as it grows.
Okay.
And other than that, I've been lucky. I do not have any birth kits by choice, because I was not going to take the chance of it. I have a son I adopted from Korea, and I have a disabled daughter who was an abused foster child who was adopted. She's considered non-adoptable, and she had a child who I have raised since we have raised since he's been a year old. He's now 17, going to graduate from school. He has ADHD, Tourette's, autism, and he has a duplicated chromosome. The duplicated chromosome causes hypospadia, which is when your pee hole could be anywhere in your penis. And he had surgery for that. He's had a tethered spinal cord. He's had a big cyst on his tailbone, tonsil and adenoids out, 2 eye surgeries, and problems with his feet. All caused by a duplicate chromosome. So he's going to start his work program. He's a great kid, and I'm tired. I can't carry him on my shoulders and do the things he wants to do anymore. But
well, you do what you can, right?
Yeah.
I smell and feel kindness all over you. I'm sure that all of this changed you as a human being, but I have a feeling your heart has always had a certain level of kindness.
I would say it did. And my younger brothers talk about different things I did for them, and there were times my dad wasn't there for periods of time.
Sure.
And I kind of jumped in on those times. I have a tendency, if I'm not doing something like this, if I just went up to a group of people, I probably wouldn't say very much. I wouldn't talk, including my family. When they go out to cabin, there's a whole bunch of other people. I usually am quiet. My voice has always been quiet, although it can get extremely loud. So pretty much, I think I've always kind of been pretty much like this.
Okay.
I mean, it's kind of like I go into I went into Walmart and somebody's like, oh, Hispanic or whatever, or Mexican. I'm in there. He didn't speak English. I don't speak Spanish. Pretty soon, we're talking about his baby and how old his baby is and everything. And he's talking to his baby about me, and the baby's holding my finger. And
nice.
It's just, I guess I like everybody.
Children know, though. They know. And I mean, they're like dogs do too, but children are wonderful.
Yeah.
And if they'll hold your hand or hold your finger, like you're saying, they know what they're doing. They're not, I don't know, they're maybe more sensitive than we are.
Yeah.
Because they haven't been jaded yet.
Yeah, right.
So.
Yeah.
Well, I'd like to invite you to take a few moments. If there's anything in this lovely pile of memorabilia that you'd like to share with us, I'd like to give you a moment or two to talk about that.
Okay. I have to grab these two.
That's fine, and if I can help any way, I will. Okay. In fact, why don't we just turn the camera a little bit, and you can use the pile to stimulate thoughts and memories and stuff.
It's not so much to stimulate, but it's to give you an idea.
I love the correspondence that I see and the photographs. I see you've got a certificate there and some other odds and ends. I'm a 20-plus year vet, and I have much memorabilia. the memorabilia is important because for many of us, this time when we serve can be a very important time in our lives, and it's critical to our development. So we hang on to the memorabilia. Oh, those are medical records. Yeah, you got plenty of stuff. Yeah.
Let me see real quick. I really wanted to show this one piece.
Sure.
I can find it. I believe it or not, I did have this all in order.
It's all right. It's all right.
Here it is.
Okay.
I'll read this one. It's short. Dear Mom, forgot to tell you, we've got in a guy who worked for Associated Press. His name is, he and another guy did not stop at a checkpoint in Saigon, and an Arvin, South Vietnamese soldier, shot him. He lost an eye and is very seriously ill. I carried him off the chopper. And the reason I know is because I interviewed him as well and got all this information. And that's his story years later. I tried to find it years ago, and I couldn't. And now, that's just recent. I decided to look again. And that's the person who I interviewed. I do not remember any sounds or heard or anything. I do remember the bandages.
Wow, this is interesting material. We're looking at, and I'm just going to say William Barton being shot in Saigon. Several articles here about that. And I think it's kind of interesting when that happens with our journalists and photojournalists. It's good to be able to send a message home like that where you were telling your mom things that were going on.
Yeah.
You know, and you hate to say I'm the one who carried him off the chopper, but then again, somebody needed to carry him off the chopper. Thank goodness you were there, okay? This is good, and I love these things. Yeah.
And this was part of a People magazine story. My mom sent it to me years ago when I was working in Denver. I got transferred from Omaha to Denver. Early on, when I was there, and this is a person who was in the 24th of Vac Hospital, and the nurse is from the 24th of Vac.
Oh my goodness.
When I was there fairly early, I was going through the wards, and I had to go through the maxillofacial ward, which is one of the worst wards, second to burns, where you walk through and the beds are at an angle and they have huge machines. I mean, just now they're probably so compact, but there were huge machines on them. And I'm looking at the GIs as I walk through, the wounded, and then one really takes me aback. And I look down and he has like a gauze cap, and there's wires coming. The wires go up, a heavier wire, and then they go down to like here. He has no face.
Oh my.
He has his eyes, his nose, and his mouth. Up above him he says, "Please do not say anything how he looks. At times he's coherent." He had gotten shot by a rocket propelled grenade. I think we had 3 of them were injured the face.
Yes.
And
wow.
so, yeah, but she had remembered that letter. I couldn't find it. I don't have all my letters, but she remembered that and then sent it to me.
Well, it's important that we share those kinds of stories and we talk about what happens to human beings in these circumstances. Again, though, not being trained or prepped in any way for it, and you still bore up under the stress and the pressure, because I know for a fact I've spoken with my dear wife, and I can do almost anything I need to do in a crisis, but I'm always very happy when I can turn it over to someone who's continuing care. And it takes very special people to be able to do that. So, you know, you were there to help start that process for so many, and I want to thank you for that. Would you like to tell us anything about how your tour felt near the end? Did that change you in any way? Sometimes when people are approaching end of tour, they get nervous. Sometimes people are just happy to be getting ready to go.
I had, I was kind of anxious to go. And then my brother shot himself in a hunting accident. My dad had took the two young brothers, and the youngest one was mad because he thought he was doing more for my dad or whatever. Put his hand on a shotgun and jumped, and didn't know he was going to lose his hand or anything. My mom had all these kids, so I had, I think like 9 days left or something, and so they sent me home. So in order to go home, I had to process out. It was Thanksgiving Day, and then somehow, somewhere, somebody took me to take the urine test. And urine tests where they had a round mirror on the wall. You stood about a good 10 feet back, pulled it out, held the bottle. When you started to go, you could run up to the urinal, but not until then. And behind you sat guys on high chairs. And the reason people were taking urine and they would squeeze it like they were going to the bathroom. And I just couldn't. And unfortunately, the bashful kidney kicked in big time. So he says, I'm just going to put the stamp on for you and stuff. I said, I appreciate it. And I was on drugs and never used them. So, and then I went out. They said, you got to hitchhike your own way to the air base. This is somebody who was on R&R, never really left this area. So I go out and these Vietnamese start coming up to me, and it hit me. I'm leaving my family. And I'm not going to leave. It just really hit me, and had tears coming down. It's like, I'm not leaving them. And some guys were crying the night before I left, and I thought, I'm not leaving them. I'm staying. So I went back to the guard shack, and I said, can you call the hospital, A&D or whatever. So I talked to them. I says, I'm not going. I'm staying here. I just need a ride. And here's where I'm at. They said, okay. Pretty soon an ambulance comes. They put me in the ambulance in the back with a couple other people. They take me to the air base. They talk to an MP. So with the dog. So I have and this was earlier before people really, so it was a lot later before people left. He was there, and if they switched, the other guy was there, MP with the dog, and they never left my sight. And then when I'm going on the plane, the MP is there, and they got the guard sniffing and all that, whatever. And he sees me, and he has this big smile on his face, and something like, good luck to you, or something like that. It's going to be good. It's going to be okay, or something. And it was just like, and
they were your people.
They were.
That's your family. They become that. Good for you. Of course you didn't want to leave them. And they wanted you to go because it was your time. They made sure you got there. How wonderful. That's actually a good story. I like that story. Thank you for sharing.
Thanks.
Because it is. That's super important. That's part of who we are. And that also testifies to your kindness and your depth of feeling because you didn't want to go. So I think that's marvelous. Thank you.
So how much time do I have, or do I need to be quiet?
You have as much time as you like. We can keep going for another 30 minutes if you want.
Well,
you just tell us. I have a couple of questions and stuff for you, but I want to give you time. If it's about this process of beginning the movement back, or you want to talk more about being in Vietnam, we can do that right now.
Vietnam, I will leave it to you because I know we haven't talked about drugs or any of those things.
Well,
and there's lots of things. I mean, you name it, I got the story. I mean, there was a guy running, and you'll know the name of it, the plates that you put on a runway or helipad, they're steel and they got holes in them.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Some guy was running, it was nighttime, and he ran into it.
Oh no.
This to here was cut off.
Oh.
About that much in the back, and you could see his skull.
Yeah.
He was laid on the litter, and I was back there pretty much for a good portion of this, and he's talking and said how it happened, and the doctors were trimming the hair and pushing the scalp up in there, slowly sewing it back on. And all I could think of was, is that going to fall off? Is it what happens? The blood don't get to it or anything like that. So after he left, he had to come every day then to get it drained, the blood. Mm-hmm. And so I asked the doctor, and I says, is he going to be okay? Is that going to stay there? And he goes, yes. He goes, that will stay there. He goes, don't worry. He goes, he's just going to have some really bad headaches for a while. And then you hear something, you hear of triggers, flashbacks.
Sure.
Then I'm here, and they talk about a little girl where a dog bought her, ripped her scalp off.
Mm-hmm.
And it's just, when you think of the things medical, you can't avoid it.
Mm-hmm.
It's every day. You say burn patient. It's there. It's there. Everything's there.
Sure.
But when I came back, I didn't feel right. I don't know what it was. And I still had time left, so I signed up for the extra year. So I went to Fort Carson, Colorado. And I got there to Colorado Springs, but my luggage didn't. So I'm sitting there, and my mind's going really crazy on me, and I'm not understanding. I can't comprehend. I can't explain it. And then my duffel bag came, and I sat. Another plane came, and I didn't know what to do. So I ended up getting a ride or a cab or whatever it was to Fort Carson, and I was going through the process. And as you're going through in processing, it's cold. I came from Vietnam, and now you got snow on the ground with
You're not acclimated.
nothing. And I'm outside picking up cigarette butts, and I'm doing this and I'm doing that, and I'm mentally falling apart. And then it got to the point where almost the time that I actually went to Vietnam, and the 31st is coming up. Well, then and then there was a thing on news about this hospital going on strike because of the war. Mm-hmm. Well, I have a little blip they passed out when I left. That was the hospital I was at. Mm-hmm. The people I knew weren't involved in it. They show up, they're all working their butts off. Uh-huh. So I'm really homesick at this point. So they get me an assignment. We're in World War II buildings, and I met two guys, and I believe they came back from Vietnam. We talked, and one had his spleen removed, and one had a car. And it's kind of odd because usually when you're out with a friend, you're two, it's usually not. And he had a car, and the three of us, we went to Aurora Gorge, we went to different places to eat. They said we're good. We did all this stuff, and you could hear a pin drop. It was something God said, because I was, at that point, I can't explain where I was. And then I got my orders, and I had to leave them. They were still there. Tried to get them to put me where one of them was, and well, your signal, you got to be signaled. Well, I wasn't signaled then. They put me cutting orders. So I did that. They didn't have a barracks, so I lived in a home with three other a basement apartment with 3 other GIs, and I was out of it, and then I started drinking and doing stupid things, and nothing really made sense to me. And one day I drive in, or they move me again. While you're doing orders, you're
It's all right.
I can't think of the word.
Personnel?
No.
Administration?
No. The coding, decoding tapes and all of that in the Signal Corps.
Encryption, decryption.
Yeah. And I can't remember the God. I've known my whole life. 72B20.
Okay.
So they moved me to be a Signal Corps. And I'm still living in the house with the same people. In some ways, it's not a good environment. And then they moved me to a job which is Signal Corps, but I'm in the Signal Corps. And I drive in one day, and it's like, what am I doing? Where am I didn't know anything. I mean, I was just a blank. And I turned and I left. Didn't go anywhere, stayed in Colorado Springs, off and on at the place that I lived at. As time goes on, it always gets deeper and deeper. It never gets any better. And it didn't get any better. And I got more and more confused on everything. I didn't know what to do. I had no one to talk to. I had no one to say, you know, I'm losing it. So one of the guys that was at the apartment I was at got a letter from my mom, and so she had talked to the commanding officer or whoever, and I didn't know who he was. So I says, tell her I'll be back tomorrow in 2 days. So she told him, well, I was late getting back. I had a time, I didn't come back at that time. So I get there, and he says, if you would come on time, I wouldn't have to do this. He called the MPs. MPs came and got me, and the guy looked at me and he says, you know what, I'm not going to handcuff you. He goes, I think I don't have to worry about anything with you. I go, you don't. So I rode in the car, went over, I was locked up. Yeah, I kind of like sat in a corner all night, didn't sleep. Next day I got up and they took me to a desk, and everybody's got like getting their things or what was going to happen. So mine, I went there, he says, Mahoney, you have 2 decisions. You can ask for an AWOL, or we're going to let you out right now with a general discharge. And I thought, and I said, I'm going to take the general discharge. Or no, I'm going to take the discharge. I'm sorry, I'm so confused. I'm going to take the court-martial. And he was shocked. He goes, what? I says, I'm taking the court-martial. He goes, why? I says, I did it. Didn't I? He goes, yeah. I says, so I have to take it because something I did. Now I have to take the consequences. So I took the court-martial. I was taken back to the company. The commander was a lieutenant, and I lived on barracks. He became like somebody who was on my side, and I don't understand it. And he put me in the training room. There was an older staff sergeant, and there was a younger sergeant who was playing tricks, and I didn't understand tricks or funny stuff. And I soon calmed down. He had such a soothing effect, and his voice was low, he couldn't speak loud. And the other sergeant did it, And I settled down, and I felt a sense of kind of being. And so I talked with a lawyer and stuff, but it went on for a couple months. I did the job. And there was a guy who came in, that was his advanced training, and he hated the Army. He hated everything. He was so mad. And you looked at him, you'd be scared to talk to him. Well, him and I became good friends. And the sergeant didn't like him at all. The sergeant became really good. We helped the sergeant pack up when he was moving to another duty station. So then it came time for court. I'm not speaking to an attorney. I don't know anything. I had the choice of, before this, of jury or
Judge.
Well, there were
Judge advocate.
three people.
Yeah, panel.
Yeah.
Panel.
And I took the panel.
Yeah.
And so we go to court, and I meet my attorney. There's like 10 steps. He goes, well, I've been sick, and I had a cold, and I didn't have time, but what can you tell me? I said, well, I'm on AWOL. I turned myself in. I got a commendation medal for this, and gave a couple people. He glanced at it. He goes, okay. So we go in. Nothing on what to say, how to say it, nothing. So I go and sit, and I'm off to the races. It kind of made sense to me. It made sense to me, but other people wouldn't make sense at all. And then they had another witness. Well, I don't know if that was going to be a witness. It was my lieutenant, and he came in. He says, I have to tell you this. Yes, he did go AWOL. Yes, he turned himself in. And he didn't have to he could take the general discharge. He goes, he's been with me for 2 months. He says, he's an exemplary soldier. Yeah. He goes, he works his butt off. Anything we need, he does. Blah, blah, blah. And I did. I mean, that's the way I am. I just lost it. And to me, it saved my life at that time. And so he left, and then the the prosecution got on there, and he went through a few things, and he says, the United States of America is requesting a year at Fort Leavenworth, a bust of all his rank, a fine, and a dishonorable discharge. And so, and stupid as I am, I didn't know. I mean, I truly, I should have been, but I truly, I thought court and everything, So they gave me 30 days of hard labor outside of my normal duty. They gave me a bust of all my rank. They gave me a fine. And I was restricted to a certain area.
Sure.
Which that ended.
But they didn't take your discharge and mess with it or anything.
No.
That's awesome.
Because I made the mistake, and I took the general. I have some benefits, or all, I don't know, but I did it. And most people don't even know it. A guy I met, and who's now one of my best buddies, who was wounded in Vietnam, knows it, and we've talked about it. And other people know about it, and it's still brought up. They don't know my whole history, a good portion of this. The question always is, I still don't understand why did you AWOL? And nobody ever will. And I don't ask them to. I did. I truly feel it saved me. And I did not what I had to do, but what I wanted to do. And so coming here, I talked to my friend yesterday, and he said, are you going to say this? And I said, yes. He goes, good. He goes, that's part of your story. He says, and you need to say that. And so.
Well, I'm looking at your discharge and it says honorable.
Yep.
So that's good. What it tells me is that you had a moment. And sometimes those moments are influenced by our experience and history.
Yeah.
But that you have an honorable discharge and that you are where you are now,
Yeah.
that tells me everything I need to know about you. We've seen your desire to serve. We've seen your heart. Your head may have been messed up. That's all. And sometimes that happens, and if you ask for a court-martial, but you're the kind of soldier that it sounds like you were, sometimes the system can be more lenient. Otherwise, you're left with a general. And so you got out and you came out with an honorable. Good on you. It's a good thing.
What was odd is, as I'm getting ready to leave, my staff sergeant and this other higher sergeant, he came over to talk to me with my sergeant. I had no idea what was going on. The guy kind of scared me. I'm still pretty quiet. And he says, I wanted to talk to you about your AWOL. He goes, you know why you got the court-martial, don't you? I go, yeah, because I went AWOL. He goes, no. He says, let me tell you this. I process all this paperwork. You are the only one who went AWOL in this period of time who was a Vietnam veteran and got the court-martial. People who were gone longer than you got a suspended Article 15. Every one of them. He goes, we are losing the war. They don't understand it. They don't know what's going on. All this is happening, and this is happening in other ways, they're making a point of view for some reason. So.
And that is part of the big green machine. It happens. For right or wrong, it happens.
Yeah. So. They would not, from that point on, I got put in for awards, I got put in for promotions, I got put in for a lot of things. And it was all turned down due to me going AWOL. Not what I did after.
Well, let me ask you a couple of questions about
Sure.
coming home and how being in the military changed your life. Okay, we've talked a little bit about your after Vietnam experience, but you eventually got out of the military. And how did all of this experience change you? Did you become different? And I know you did, but do you approach problems, issues, life differently than you did before? Other stuff?
It has made me quieter on some things. Like, I never, probably 3 times, have worded something that identified me as a Vietnam veteran. Because I have been accused by a Vietnam veteran who was selling things of being a poser. And the reason I'm a poser is because I couldn't give my hierarchy. You weren't where the action was. You don't, blah, blah, blah.
Oh, yeah. Receiving the wounded and the dead's not where the action is. Yeah, baloney, you did, okay? I'm a 20-year veteran of combat arms in the United States. I've been to 2 wars. Okay, you may not have been standing up and kicking doors or getting shot in the bush, but you were taking care of the people coming out. You're in it. You're in it. You weren't sweeping floors and making coffee for some general somewhere. Okay?
Well,
you were in it. I'm sorry, I shouldn't say that, but I'm going to.
Well, I met, years and years later, I met a captain.
Yeah.
And I was doing a civilian job, I met a captain, and I talked to him a little bit about it. He goes, did you ever appeal it? He goes, you need to go and have it erased from your record. So I wrote the letter, did it all myself, and submitted it, and I was turned down. I was turned down because I didn't use the resources at hand. And it's my fault about the attorney. that's your fault because you didn't. They said that in the letter. And on my discharge, there's a third paper where they had to correct everything because I wasn't even correct as far as what I had received and done over there and that. And I worked for the VA for 12 years.
Oh, okay.
Because I decided I couldn't deal with things. I'm going to go, and this is just in 2003 I did. And I had to get back home.
Yeah.
And I went there, and it wasn't. It was a whole new world.
Sure.
And shoot. At the VA, I sent out letters to everybody. You know, I kind of was my own person in this. Everything I did, tons of things. The only person who did it, and one of them was I had to send a letter to every Vietnam veteran. I wasn't on the list. I went to the office. Business office, on the list. The response was, what does it really matter? And I said, you're sending things out to Vietnam veterans. I'm not included in anything. I still was included until sometime later, I started seeing a nut doctor. And he's like, I mean, he's just really good. And I told him what I did, and I brought letters, and he read, you know, gave him some, and read them, and I went back, and he said, I do not understand how you were able to do that job. I don't. I'm a psychiatrist. I was in Iraq, and at times I tried to go into the hospital and work.
Sure.
And way different now than it was then, but I would go into the hospital, and they would bring in. He goes, and then I see what you've done, you know, and I talked about posing, and then he says, absolutely. He goes, I said, well, how do you know I'm not coming here lying? He goes, I know you're not lying. I see everything you've did, you know, and finally it was a good feeling, you know. I mean, I went someplace, I did wear a Vietnam t-shirt. It says, in fact, it's got the emblem of the hospital. It says, and my story begins, and has the emblem in the front. And clearly, I was a Vietnam veteran, and people going around, people had Vietnam veterans hat, and I did, shaking their hands. Thank you for your service. Thank you, sir, for your service. Not one person came to me. And I told my Vietnam buddy, that happens a lot. And so, I mean, I don't wear anything. I said, maybe we don't have tattoos, period, but I need to put it on my forehead. Well, and he knows everything.
I'm sorry that happens with you. I want to talk with you after this interview about some resources and things, but I'm going to continue interviewing you, and we'll talk about some resources in a little bit. Are you a member of any veterans organizations? VFW, Legion?
No.
Okay.
Part of it is fear.
Sure.
Part of it is not fitting in because I'm a different breed. Sure. I went to a hospital reunion, and my buddy helped me go. He felt really important. And so I went there, and I was by myself because no one was interested in going with me. And my buddy was at his own, and he was calling, checking up on me. And I didn't really fit in. Because you're talking all medical. I'm not medical. I was never medical, and I'm still Signal Corps. And there was a corpsman there who said, we was talking about it, he goes, I told him what I did. I was an A&D, and I did. He goes, no, you didn't do any of that. I guess I did. He goes, all you were was a paper pusher. You didn't do any of that. He goes, it was a corpsman, and I was a corpsman, and I was in the ER, and we took care of everything, and bringing the patients and all that. You did none of that. And that ended a lot of stuff right then and there.
Apparently not that long. Yeah. Apparently not where you were. No,
well, they may have done it earlier, but at this point in time, they didn't.
Yeah, absolutely.
So,
okay. So as we reflect on all of this, is there any kind of message that you would like to leave for follow-on generations about the Vietnam War, veterans, or anything else?
I have heard from, even working at the VA, where I've had them not knowing me, World War II veterans say about Vietnam veterans, we lost the war, or we did this. A lot of people say that, and in my thinking is, you hear that from people who served in World War II. It was a different animal. Korean people, from what I understand, they're kind of like, they served, it was a short period of time, but gee, look at the Vietnam veterans. Vietnam veterans are looking and saying, look what happened to us.
Oh, sure.
And so I think I was so proud of what I did, and what I did, never thought I would ever do in my life, and what I really accomplished. And saying things seem to take some things away from it. So it's better, I think the thing of it is everybody who serves is more than an honorable person. And they should be so proud of what they did. I don't care what they did, burn shit, I don't care, they served. And the thing that makes me the maddest, and I have put out stuff like this, is you hear the greatest generation. Am I not part of my greatest generation, or the Korean vets, or the Desert Storm, or Iraq? Everything's seems to be based on the greatest generation. And my dad was in World War II. In Germany, my uncle was a fighter pilot in World War II. Many of my relatives were. It's not that they weren't the greatest generation, but it was a long time for people to kind of start remembering. I know they had a parade. My mom called me in Denver. You got to go to the parade. There's going to be a parade downtown, and all the veterans are going to be there. It was for, I can't remember what it was for. And I says, I will not go in the parade. But I did go there. And they had like wounded people. I was just going crazy. They had some of the veterans from Desert Storm, whoever. They were going crazy. They had World War II, and they were really going crazy. And then they had some more, and then they had Korean, and Korean was kind of not crazy, but there's some applaud stuff. And then a little bit later, here comes the Vietnam veterans, and I knew them. I knew a lot of them, and their heads were kind of down, and I could see it in their eyes. I could see it in their eyes. And my brother was at the end, and he said, he goes, Mickey, I was at the end, and I saw them when they were breaking up. And some people were trying to shake their hands, and this one guy said, this is too little, too late, and walked away. I also was for 12 weeks about PTSD and things like that, and there was one guy who was not from the Vietnam, but a later, and he was scared to death. He said that we're going to kill him because he's getting things that we never got and all that. And he one day he says, I got to say this. He says, I have never been treated so well, by anybody else. And I think, as we all know, and for any other vet, it's you've got to accomplish it. Nobody else, unless they're in the service, have. And need to be extremely proud of yourself and never feel that, that you're not, So that always makes me upset. But it is what it is.
Have you talked with your family about this story before?
No.
Or have you kept most of this to yourself your entire life?
I have kept it. The only people other than here who will hear it is I talked up. I had a wallet that said Vietnam veteran, and a kid saw it at Home Depot. He goes, "Oh, were you a Vietnam veteran?" I go, "Yes." He goes, "Oh, we're talking about Vietnam veteran. Will you come to my school and talk?" I go, "Yes." He goes, "Can I have your phone number?" I go, "Yes." He goes, "I'll have my teacher call you." Next morning, early, she called me. We talked for a little bit. She says, "Will you come and talk to my class?" I talked to 2 classes. Mm-hmm. I brought in pictures and letters went ahead of time, so they would see it and they could look at it and have questions about it, and my canteen and my helmet and all that. And then all those words I gave her, the words we hand out.
Right.
Then I got a call, "Will you do it next year?" So I did it next year. Then I met a Vietnam veteran, my buddy, and I told him, and we talked, and I told him how embarrassed I was to talk to him. I was afraid to. And he says, "Your story takes place after mine, and I wouldn't want your story and what you did." And it reminded me of a guy in Vietnam they brought in wounded, and he was walking and he was done, and he said he's going to be billeted, and he says, "Do you do this every night?" I go, "Pretty much so." "All of this?" I go, "Yes." He goes, "Thank God I'm not here. Thank God I'm where I'm at. I could never do this." Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And that was the biggest compliment I could ever get in my life, I think. So, whatever it is, they need to be proud. I mean, I think too many times, especially nowadays, they're not thought of,
Well, I have 2 more questions
Sure.
for you. Is there anything you'd like to talk about that I haven't asked you about? I feel like you've given us a very comprehensive review of your experience, but if there's something specific that you'd like to talk about, now's the time.
The only thing we didn't really address was drugs.
Okay.
Because my second night home from Vietnam, some people said, "Let's go to a party from Exorb," and I was pushed, and the lady said, "You're nothing basically but a baby killer and a drug addict," or whatever. And the 93rd closed, but it became the detox. And I went on an ambulance run, and I went up to the 93rd, mm-hmm. and it was like The Walking Dead before there was a Walking Dead. I thought of it as a Walking Dead. There was barbed wire, fencing, and everything like that. They're walking around, and we went there to pick up somebody and bring them to the hospital. One time there was a Mars call coming in, and they asked me if I wanted to.
Just for the benefit of those watching, Mars was the use of amateur radio to talk around the world, from a phone to a transmitter, transmit around the world, pick up on the other end with an amateur radio operator who would then put it onto another telephone so that people could talk back and forth around the world before satellite.
Correct.
Thank you. I'm sorry, I just want to make sure that got in.
So I had a chance to do that, but I was too embarrassed.
Mm-hmm.
Because you're in the operating room, and I just didn't do it. So I had a choice. Do you want to catheterize this guy? Because he's unconscious, he's going to be unconscious, he's overdosed. Or do you want to give this guy an enema? So not that it bothered me to do it or anything, but I thought, well, all these people will be watching me, oh, look, And so I did the enema. I didn't have to put it in, but that guy was also drug user. He's very constipated. And so I went in the back room and I had to very slowly push it, and very slowly, because he was super constipated. Eventually, I pushed a little harder because he started cussing at me. It's all your fucking fault. I wouldn't have to be here, and just going on and on. And then I came out, and the unconscious guy and the corpsman who catheterized him was saying, look at this. He had the biggest erection you could ever think. And people were looking at it, and there's people, take my picture. And I mean, it was huge. And you had to find humor in everything. Otherwise you would have been worthless. And so some nurses says, he had IVs going, stuff, they're going to take him to where they says, let's put IV stands on each corner, and they made the carnations out of Kleenexes. So they had flowers, and put them in his hands. Then on the IV posts, they made American flags and colored them, so we'd have American flags. And then we had to I was one of them who took them to the ward, and I often think, wouldn't it be terrible if somebody had pictures, and he's over at somebody's house, they go, look at this picture, and there would be him laying on, because they took pictures. But T.C. Hill, you had a lot of constipation with heroin. And we go to T.C. Hill, and we bring back people. One of the people that came back had 14 pounds of shit in him.
Oh, wow.
And they took him in, and they had to do surgery to get it out. Honestly, it's in the letter. And written that day. And a nurse wrote a book about the 24th. And I didn't read it, but there's an excerpt from the book about people on drug. She was in the operating room, and a person had 23 pounds in there.
Good Lord.
Good
Lord.
So it's alcohol. I knew better never to go on alcohol, except when I was going nutty. And drugs, just because of what I saw. I just thought, oh my God. Not that I didn't. Many years after I was in the service, I smoked marijuana a couple times.
Yeah.
But that was kind of it, And so that was.
But best to stay away from, and
Yeah.
you can see all the issues associated
Yeah.
with.
And it's good when I go to Ralston High, which is the kids have been wonderful. Some other classes had joined, and we go in the lecture room, lecture hall a lot of times. But it's good to talk to the kids about and have the letter, and they can read it, and things I would have never thought of, and all this, and they are really good about this.
Wow.
And those who don't know catheterization, I tend to see to bring a catheter in and we talk about it.
Yeah, I'm a big fan of catheterization. Only had it done a couple times. I'd like to stay away from that in the future, if at all possible. My very last question for you is, what do you wish more people generally knew about veterans?
Depending where you were at, not necessarily you had to be there, but people who experienced being in the war, parts of it more than others, they did not come back unscratched. And I think so many times people look at them as, well, that they gave up some years. Some in Vietnam gave up more than 1 year, being away from their family, and funerals and weddings and get-together. And they had a choice. The choice was go to Canada, or the choice was stay here. I had a choice, and I knew, my history said, you're going, so I'm going. But whether or not you agree with Vietnam or what was done, these individuals received a notice to go or volunteered, they went to support a people from communism and other things, and no one, for any reason, should have looked down because they're sure. But Vietnam veterans, I mean, I've heard it from a lot of non-Vietnam veterans, and somebody says, "What'd you do?" Somebody, and I always will say, "Well, he's a Vietnam veteran," and some guy did, and we in Las Vegas, and this was sitting, and the guy next to me says, "What did you do?" I says, "Well, I worked in a hospital." Right? He just shut me up right there. He says, "Oh, let me tell you about wounds and what happens when you're on, you know." And they go on, and it's like,
seen some of the worst.
yeah, and
Mm-hmm.
there needs to be an appreciation, and where would we be if through all the years there weren't people defending this country?
Mm-hmm.
Where would we be? I mean, I know where it'd be, and I shudders and hate to think of it. I'd want to be dead.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. Well, once on behalf of the Library of Congress Veterans History Program, the Nebraska Vietnam Veterans Memorial Foundation Share Your Story program, and partnered with Bellevue University, who is going to put this in a database for future students to use for oral history and investigation of veterans across the spectrum. Again, I'm Mark Straley here with Mick Mahoney Jr. I'd like to thank you for your service. I'd like to thank you for your time today. Most especially, I'd like to welcome you home and thank you for participating in the Share Your Story program. Thank you very much.
Thank you. And I greatly appreciate the opportunity to really tell my story.
Outstanding.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Go ahead and hit that.